Hello, our truth warriors. Today's guest has been following the same paths into the financial world that I have, and has an incredible channel on YouTube called Lava. And we will put the link in the description of this podcast today for everyone to go and check that out. Now, our ability to present the truth behind the current markets, the banking systems, and the social economic influences that can be unseen by many, yet they do impact our lives absolutely greatly, and there's not a lot we can do about it apart from follow it and understand the patterns that we see. So here today to give us some great conversation is the incredible Lava. How are you?
I am well. Thank you very kindly. And I'm honored to be here. So thank you so much.
No, it really is great to see you. Tell us how you got into this and what prompted you to set up your channel to start giving this information out to people.
Well, it's something quite strange, actually. Started from finance, and also I have an extensive background in real estate. And so what I've noticed is quite a few of us, once we start digging behind what happened, and I was in 2008.
Yeah.
And so I worked with some of the banks. And when we start digging a little bit farther, you start seeing a little bit more. And once you go down that rabbit hole, then it just start digging and realize what's actually going on. And just from there, then I've got to let people know.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was very similar to myself. 2008 for me was the eye-opening moment, and it caused the availability of finance to dry up. I had a few car dealerships in the UK at the time, and with it being high-end vehicles, there was no financing available. So those vehicles sat there. We still had bills to pay, and we still had leases and staff and everything that needed to go out. And over 2 years, it really did bleed the company dry to the point where we liquidated it. And to me, that was something that kind of woke me up. I really looked at the reasons why, hopefully never to repeat that again. And the more we dug down that rabbit hole, we found out that it was external influences that caused this. And it wasn't for the best interests of the majority of the people. And it really was an eye opener. And, we both follow Gregory Manarino. We have a mutual friend of ours. It was also a great source of information, and at the time, he was putting out some fantastic information about what was going on. He was ex-Bear Stearns. Well, let's say hello to Greg. Hello, Greg. How are you?
Hi, Greg.
Let's give him a wave.
Aloha, my friend.
We'll send him this over, and we'll see how he sees our conversation today. So when it comes down to the platforms that a lot of people follow in regards to tracking the stock markets, we all have different preferences. Is the one that you particularly use and like to follow for ease of use or for the amount of information that you get from it?
I actually use several, and I try to keep I'm more of a macro view type of person. And so the distinct platforms that I use, like for instance, for my stocks or charting, I use TradingView, but it doesn't really matter what you're looking at. It's the source of the information I go through. I always try to get the other side,
Yeah.
not just one, because mainstream media is really the killer here. And so, yeah. And so what I found out is there's so much more behind this that affects everybody. It's going to affect all of us. And that's kind of more what I wanted to get into today. Is it's so much deeper than anybody knows.
Yeah.
And the direction that it's headed is really awful,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be honest.
I totally agree with you. I mean, currently, we're in the early stages of World War III, and that for me speaks volumes about the state of the economy. It's been a continuous track record that when they do take us to war, normally it is a point of time where the financial situation of governments and different countries around the world are in an absolute hole. And at this point, they use war to dig it out of. To me, it's a temporary reprieve anyway. But this seems to be one of the tools that's in their box currently. Are you seeing the same things as I am?
Very much so, very much so. So they're using war as a cover, first off, for the corruption and for their whole plan to do this in the first place. And financially, politically, it's a good move for them because, as it is with the United States, it's bolstering our GDP.
Yeah.
But what people don't realize is all of those weapons we're making, we're not getting anything back for that. It's not true production.
No.
So these numbers that we're getting out, I mean, all of this is just pushing towards this overall, they've got a whole agenda for us.
Yeah.
So
I mean, going back to 2008 and also looking at the current times as well, one of the things that people very rarely look at are the rating agencies. You know, are they complicit in giving false ratings and promoting certain things as being good in regards to maybe financial vehicles for people for investments? You know,
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, we look back at obviously what was packaged up back in 2008, but I'm seeing very similar trends right now where people are being led down a very dangerous path. And, you know, it's almost like the Pied Piper leading them away, you know, dancing away to this merry tune where unfortunately the greed of many people think that they're going to get rich quick putting the money into certain things. And the ratings agencies are doing absolutely nothing to deter them. I mean, how do you think they're allowed to continue with this? Is this something
Well,
that people should focus on more?
the rating agencies are a business in themselves, and they're very heavily coerced by these larger by the banks. They own them.
Yeah.
So when they say, I want this regraded, I don't think you did a very good job. Now you're going to play along this time, aren't you? Otherwise, you know, we're going to the next one down the road. So much so, and it's so heavily corrupt that now the new BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are creating their own rating agency. They're well aware of this.
Yes,
So very much
absolutely.
so.
And hopefully that'll give them a clearer view of the rest of the world, certainly when it comes to trading with other countries outside of those BRICS nations. Now, the Federal
Yeah.
Reserve and the central banks, they only have one product, which is debt. And they are deliberately saturating the markets, governments, and countries. What is their ultimate goal with this? I mean, are they looking to have that much money owed to them by governments and countries and kings and queens around the world that at some stage they can actually take this legally?
It's, well, yes, it's all about control, is what it drills down to. And, you know, it kind of heads towards this amazingly dystopian environment that you only read about in books, but we're heading toward that at a rapid pace.
Yeah.
And so this whole thing of debt is how our largest export as the United States is inflation.
Yes.
So every time we're printing, giving to our citizens, doing as we will with that, we're devaluing every other country's holdings. And a lot of people don't realize this. Otherwise, if other countries knew this, they would be so angry. They would probably be revolting. However, we've got this mechanism here toward, uh, they really want this to head toward chaos. And this is actually a point where I would like to start sharing, because this is all about the Great Reset. So if
Yes.
that's all right with you,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
with this
certainly. I
one.
mean, you know, the control mechanisms of the World Economic Forum, their infiltration into governments with young global leaders and the Great Reset is something that many people are overlooking and not seeing the connection to the financial systems at the moment, which again is another tool for controlling people.
Absolutely. So we've got, this is just an article on this because it's spreading, and they're talking about how this is basically the source for conspiracy theories. So, you know, if you tell the truth, you're accused of being conspiracy theorist.
Yeah,
But they've got an entire setup, and this, it's not just the Federal Reserve. They've got a complete structure involving the United Nations, which is also the United States and arm, the World Bank, which is another form of this. So they meet every year and they choose our fate.
yeah,
And people that don't believe me, this is from their own sites. I've got quite a bit from their own sites. We've got Agenda 2030. So the whole Sustainable Development Group, uh, all of this is heading towards this. So we're going to be having digital IDs.
yeah,
We're heading towards central bank digital currencies so that they can track our money. And basically, we have no freedoms. Our freedom is under attack.
yeah.
So
And it's funny because, I try to tell people and warn people about these agendas, about the United Nations, about the World Economic Forum. And again, as you said earlier, this term of conspiracy theory comes out, and it's easier for them to label you as a conspiracy theorist rather than actually go and look at the evidence. And I do tell them, if you don't believe me, go to the World Economic Forum website, go to the United Nations website, go to the central bank websites, or the Bank of International Settlements, or whoever it is that is following this agenda. It's all laid out there for them to see and read. It's not hidden. It can't be a
It's
conspiracy theory if I'm
it's
quoting
not.
exactly what you're
If you
putting out here as well.
They lay it out directly what they want to do with us. Okay, so this, for instance, this is the United Nations. You go through, they talk about how they want to make this sustainable. And what do they mean by this? Basically, a culling of the population.
Yes.
And you have to work within their guidelines. So they've got this all mapped out. With the World Economic Forum, they touch every bit of our lives. We've got digital identities and all this. Look at these
Yeah.
designer pages. It's a virus.
Yes.
So I'm not going to talk too much about things because I don't want your channel in the to get banned.
Oh,
So
we're good with that. Don't worry. We've already had two YouTube channels terminated,
oh my
and I
goodness.
just I just keep pushing the boundaries. If they do it again, they do it again. The truth's the truth. It's got to get out there.
But that's the prime example. We have no freedom of speech. We have no freedom of speech. They will be limiting freedom of movement is next. If you don't have, used to have passports, but now you're going to have your digital IDs. And this is directly off of their page, World Economic Forum, regarding climate change. So they're going to intertie all of these. And there's just some crazy things in here. They're talking about human rights. What's that got to do with climate change? And you have to think about these things. So they've got it all roped in and our lives mapped out. We're going to be tokenized soon, where they put us on the blockchain to be traded. They're going to be doing this with all of our resources, water,
Yeah,
probably even air, to
that's it.
tokenize this lake, this body of water. They're trading that now. It's a
Yeah.
tradable good,
Oh yeah. I
and
mean,
people don't
Nestle
realize this.
Nestle own so much water and lakes around the world that people don't realize that this is all going to be used against us, because once these huge corporations and the pyramid of these corporations, unfortunately, I was speaking with the family last night, and I was explaining to my children that, you know, we got talking about Pepsi Cola, and it was the something as simple as a Pepsi Cola bottle being on a box for a what would it be? It would be Domino's pizza. And I said, have you noticed that the colors of Pepsi Cola and Domino's Pizza are exactly the same? I said, I guarantee if you started looking into these companies, that they would be interlinked, and that the pyramid of control means that eventually these companies, these corporations, these monopolies are held by very, very few companies at the top. And I do believe that it eventually dwindles down just to two major monopolies that oversee everything that touches our life out there.
Right. Um, BlackRock being a main one.
Yeah.
So they're a purchasing arm of basically Federal Reserve, who's not supposed to be able to purchase certain asset classes. And so they just have this corporation do it for them. Everything from single family homes to stocks they're not supposed to do, to other corporations. They own and control them. So then they can say, no, we don't have this company, much like Microsoft just did with ChatGPT.
Yes.
So OpenAI, they don't own them. They can say they're separate, but however, we know how that's working.
Yeah.
So
And that's it. I was talking with somebody this week about, again, all the climate change policy in Canada on the beginning of April this year. The climate change, the carbon taxes are going to come into effect. So everything that people buy and use is going to come with extra taxation, which is going to increase the cost of living for more people. But the crazy thing is, when you look at Canada and the amount of output that they claim they have in CO2, the actual amount of trees within the boreal forests that they have there and the amount of trees that they have right across Canada actually consumes more carbon than they would ever produce, which means Canada itself is carbon neutral. So, what I am seeing for this taxation, which is what it is, this is just another reason to take money from people to maybe try and settle some of the debts or to put the money further forward for things and maybe satisfy the central banks that this government is raising more revenue to pay back the actual billions of dollars that they are lending on a very frequent basis.
Correct. That's what they say is licensing, is the government taking something from you that was free in the first place and charging you for it. So, for instance, and it's true, if you look at hunting or fishing,
Yeah,
well, that was free, but now you have to get a license.
yeah.
And what do? You go and you pay. You have to tell them who you are. So that's kind of the drive.
And that's it.
So,
And with any licensing as well, it always comes with rules, regulations, and laws
correct.
that people need to abide by. And if people do not abide by those laws, again, it's a financial fine. They're just there to take money off people in any way and any form they can, which is lowering the standard of living. People are losing the houses, and the cost of feeding a family and running a home now has got to the point where so many people are having to leave their properties. And people are, in every city we've visited and been to, we are seeing tent cities starting up where people are now living on the streets just
Yeah,
because of what their very own government has done to them. And it absolutely
correct.
astounds me.
Hoovervilles. Well, the government doesn't care about you. Anybody that thinks, that the government cares more about you than the conspiracy theorists, it's they're in for a surprise. And the harder part for me is seeing the people that are honest. They're hardworking. They have to work two jobs, so they don't have time to look at what's going on. They have no chance to see any of this.
Yeah.
So they go to work all day. They barely come home. They don't have the time to see what's really going on,
No,
and
no.
they're just getting roped into this.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know, it's sad. So I'm just going to go on. I'm still sharing this because this is part of it too. UN legal identity agenda. Have you heard of this?
No, I
Or no?
haven't. No.
Okay. So they're pushing this first off through third world countries, so to speak. Quote unquote, these poor people, they need stuff. So we're going to give them legal identities. So we can help them with aid. That's always how it starts, you know.
Yeah.
And so all of these things that I can't say. Anyway, so they're going to start with the lower-income countries and they wait until there is a crisis and then they usher in the solution. And this is another site that I watch, and here we go, in developing nations. But they talk about all the breakthroughs that they've got. So featuring hand scanning and multiple, now we're getting this into DNA, will be tied to your digital identity. And you can't change that. Anyone that's gone through that, you've had your social security is what we used in the United States, had that stolen your identity. You cannot change your DNA.
Yeah.
So once we have troubles with these and they've got you locked in, and the trouble with this afterwards is what they're going to use it for.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of
you know,
people a lot of people think that this kind of thing is just companies coming up, oh, wouldn't this be a good idea? This is no longer an idea. This is something that's full steam ahead. This is something that the governments are going to implement. And it's going to, again, as we said earlier, the corporations and the monopoly is held by very, very few individuals. And these are the individuals that want to bring this in. This is nothing more than an invisible prison that's going to hold people, you know,
absolutely.
they'll just switch us off, basically. At the end of the day, if even for what I'm doing now, speaking out, showing people what's going on, it'll get to a point that it's going to be very similar to the China's social scoring system, the credit system that they have there. And that's got to the stage now that if somebody jaywalks, across a road, it will facially recognize who they are and automatically debit the fine from their account before they've even reached the other side of the road. It's and
Very efficient.
this is where they want everything to go. You know, they want to drain people of any finances they have, any power they have. And basically, what people don't realize, if we head forward with this, allow this to happen, we are in for 1,000 years of slavery. And that is people's children, grandchildren, and their great grandchildren that are going to suffer. And we really need to start making people aware of this so people can resist as much as they can and basically not go along with the program, get rid of the bad apples that are trying to enslave humanity to this level.
Agreed. You know, just today, they're talking about a ban on TikTok, it's the app on your phone. But the problem with that is that it's leading it down to where one individual can make the decision. Now, I personally don't like TikTok, but that's not the point. They can make the decision of what you're allowed to see, what you're allowed to use.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more and more of that every day. And that's not what the government is supposed to be for.
Yeah.
They're supposed to represent us. We don't need a leader.
No.
It was never to be a leader. It was supposed to be someone that would represent our best interest. That is not what we have. So, and you know, I realize there's consequences for what I'm saying. For everything you look at, they will tie all of this in. They will know every website you go to, everything you're reading, and this will all be tied in because those that, like you were saying, the social credit score. And if they don't like what you've said or what you've done, they're going to, you know, turn off. You're not allowed to have internet anymore for
Yeah.
a while until you start behaving. And we've even got, as it is now, there's a website. Don't know if you've seen this or if anybody knows about this, but they
No.
are encouraging sedition hunters. So they are encouraging people to basically turn on each other.
It's classic divide and conquer.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's
it keeps, and we'll end up on this list someday, my friend, probably.
probably
So
already on the list.
start it off. So it's
Yeah.
just, we need to let people know not just about this first off, but also how to get outside of it, how to transact out of their system, because they're going to lock up, as you're saying, all of the money. They're going to automatically tax you. You have no say about it. So I've put together a little list of things that we can do. You know, some of the things that I'm sure you use as well: gold and silver,
Yes.
stacking your own food, growing your own food if at all possible. Ammunition is
Yes.
very good, tradable good. I mean, just about anything that you can trade yourselves that has value. Basically, bringing back barter. And the primary for all of it is community. Get to know who you're around, get to know who you can trade with, who you can trust. And that's the only way we're going to get through this. That's the bright light at the end of this tunnel.
That's it. But, you know, unfortunately, and we see it in every local community, the moment you pop your head out and start trying to speak to people and warn people, there is a big pushback, which again causes that divide within the communities that you're trying to bring together. And sadly, you know, those who don't see it and don't think that they need to prepare and get ready are the ones who are going to suffer the most. And, you know, there's nothing we can do to change that mindset of those people. You know, I've put stuff out there to try and show people what's going on. And again, you know, you get called absolutely crazy.
Mhm.
Somebody actually said to me the other day, and I had to have a little bit of a laugh about it. I put some information out there talking about the problems that we're facing and the financial things. And they, again, you know, they label the conspiracy theory side of things. But what was actually funny is that they like to quote what their beliefs are, which is the mainstream media. They're trying to tell me that you know, everything's fine. There's no problem with the financial markets. The financial markets are at an all-time high, and therefore everything is great and rosy. And these rose-tinted glasses, unfortunately, that they see the world through, is a deliberate programming from the mainstream media and the social media to give people the mindset. And this, unfortunately, is the resistance that we're up against. And it's the people that we are trying to help around us.
Agreed. They, you know, they're so fed by this mainstream media, they don't want to look themselves. And there's a lot of people, which is really strange, they don't want to see the truth.
Yeah.
They don't like feeling like they've been duped all of their lives, so it doesn't matter what happens to them. They refuse to see the truth.
Yeah.
And that's very strange to me. But and then there's others that are just afraid. And I understand that, but there's still got to be a time where you're gonna have to choose because it's coming very rapidly.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter where you think you are, you must choose sides. So why not choose now when you've got a clear head? Rather
Absolutely.
than when you're forced about it, rather
Yeah.
than when they're loading you onto a train to take you off to,
Oh yeah.
as my friend says,
I'd rather be several years early than 1 minute too late, because 1 minute too late is just an unrecoverable situation. And I
Agreed.
do feel that the government and what's going on are deliberately putting people into this position. So when things are brought down, whether whichever tool they use out the toolbox, whether it's something from war, whether it's something from financial collapses, this means that people will cry out for help. And again, the same bad actors, the same people who have been controlling the money supply and the same people that own these corporation and monopolies are going to be the ones who are going to step in with the solution. And what we're seeing here on the screen are the very group of people that are going to come together with the solution. And
Yes.
unfortunately, it's not the best solution. It's just their solution. And it's something, again, which is going to give them massive control over the populace of the planet. And we have to awaken a lot of people to be able to do that. Can we possibly talk about liquidity and M2 velocity and explain to people what this means and give them a better understanding of what they should keep an eye out for, to understand how this is manipulated and where to see the key things that will alert them to a major problem?
Well, at the very basis of it, yes, with the monetary supply, we're going back to basically fiat currencies is what I'm
Yeah.
seeing that you're in reference to. So when you're talking about fiat currencies, it's measured by the actual amount of money supply, which is how many dollars exist.
Yeah.
And then, but that alone, so if you imagine everybody has, $3 million, but nobody spends any of it,
Hmm.
there's a lot of supply, but there's no motion. So
Right.
that is the velocity. So when people start spending money, I pay you for at the store for some goods, then I use those goods to build something for somebody else. That creates the economy, and that's a real economy. And we're lacking that right now. Everybody's kind of locking down,
Yeah.
and so that's where this liquidity is starting to halt. The banks are no longer lending, and so it's going to freeze up at some point in time. Nobody's spending anything. They're all just going to say, I can make it through, for a short period of time, whatever it might be. And no one will spend anything for that period of time. That will be the lockup.
Yeah. And
So
I can, I can understand how people want to put money away, not only for a rainy day, but control their spending, especially with the costs and the way things are going. A lot of people are being a little bit more frugal with what they're spending. They're not going on holidays. They're not buying new cars. They're not moving house. And again, all this really does affect the system itself. Are we okay on the screen sharing now? We got more to see there, or should we just shut that down for a second?
I can close it if
Yep.
you like.
Yep. No problem. There we go.
Though I think it's more interesting to look at that than me, but it's not
So
about me.
let's talk about the derivatives market. A lot of people are not aware what a derivative is. And, I am seeing that these derivatives markets now are actually bigger than the GDP of the countries that they are in. Can you explain to us what the derivative is, how it's dangerous, and how basically it's like going to the casino and gambling, and how it's got out of hand massively.
So, derivative is anything that is not the product itself. So, for instance, let's say if I want to purchase your house is the item, but a derivative of that would be the loan. So I'm going to get a loan to purchase your house. So that loan is actually a product of your house. So I'm going to take that loan. The bank will take that loan and sell it to another bank, and then they begin to leverage it. They wrap it with other ones. And this is part of what happened with the banking crisis.
Yeah.
So once the leverage comes in, that's when it becomes dangerous. So in the case of the stock market, let's say an Apple share of Apple company, that they're not actually selling that share of the company, but the right for somebody to purchase it. And when they do this at 100 times,
Yeah.
and when they do that at 100 times leverage and it doesn't actually exist that much of it, and then they do it again, they do that in multiples. So that's how you can take $1 and like the whole lending scheme, Ponzi scheme that we have for the loans that they're pushing, that's why it's imploding.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm doing a very good job at
No,
explaining
no,
this, but
no, it's great. I mean, it's very much in the terms that people can understand it, because for a lot of people, they don't understand what the derivatives are, and more importantly, people do not realize the danger of the derivatives. This is one, there's several things within the market that I see that are potential disastrous things. It's like a ticking time bomb. We just don't know when it's going to go off. The derivatives is one of those big ones, as well as the debt market itself. And at any point, one of these can go down. There can be a major, destabilization within that market, and it will cause all the others, as far as I can see, to follow suit and topple, because it's just like a lot of dominoes have been stacked up. It just takes the first one to be touched, it will fall, and it will bring the rest down. And
correct.
that's one of my major concerns. Now, one of the key indicators that people will use will be the bond market, and I know that the 10-year bond yields are one of the key indicators of that. And we've always been told that if we ever see the 10-year yield spike,
Mhm.
that we should be very cautious of what's going on in the markets. With the amount of money that's being pumped in by the central banks to shore the markets up and to stop them failing, is the 10-year yield spike still something that can be followed as a key indicator to give people a little bit of a warning of what's happening? Or are we getting the markets flooded with money created out of thin air by the central banks to the extent that no longer this can be the indicator?
So it's kind of the 10-year is kind of the standard go-to. So it's what everybody uses to kind of keep an eye on that debt market. And I think that it is still relative,
Yeah,
very much so. So even with all of the distortions in the market that we're seeing, we still need to keep our eye on that 10-year yield, because it is that interest rate that tells us what's going on with it, and right before it going into panic mode,
yeah,
so to speak. And the debt market is so much larger than the stock market. It's insane.
yeah.
But at the same time, there's another side to this. You had mentioned all of the money printing. I think it's very interesting that it's kind of getting used to this level here. So what that's telling me, and I haven't heard a lot of people talking about this, but the cost level of stocks right now, we just hit all-time highs.
Yeah,
But that is an indicator of the inflation of the money supply. So those stocks are not worth that value necessarily. Same like home prices. And they're saying these prices are going up. In actuality, they're not. It's just that there's so much money flooding the system now that we're basically right before a hyperinflationary environment. However, I think there's going to be a bounce first, and we have no excuse for this. By the way, we've seen this happen before.
yeah.
This is not the first time, so we can say, that time when it happened, nobody had any idea. We don't have that.
Yeah.
We saw it happen and we're doing it again. So I expect something similar. There would be a bounce where there's a flood into the dollar, at which time it will become very valuable. Everybody will be, going towards the dollar. Not long after that, we'll hit that hyperinflationary well. It will just get
Yeah.
completely out of their control.
And that's it, even with the hyperinflation. I mean, I have a beautiful collection of hyperinflated notes from all around the world, from Yugoslavia, Weimar Republic in Germany, Greece, all different parts around the world. I mean, I think I've got $100 trillion note from Zimbabwe as well. And
A trillionaire.
yeah, on paper, I'm worth a lot of money apparently. But we know that these notes are worthless. People would take wheelbarrow loads of cash to buy a loaf of bread during these hyperinflations. And for people to think that this would never happen again would be very naive of them, because it has happened time and time again. And I've got the banknotes to prove it from these
It's
countries.
happening right now.
Yes.
Different countries. No?
Yeah, that's it. It's absolutely insane. Now we've got in our minds, and as I said, there's lots of tools that they can use in their toolbox. There's lots of financial instruments out there that are at great high risk right now. Any of them could be a trigger of the next collapse, but is there anything particular that you think is most likely to be the trigger, or is it very difficult to say at this moment in time?
It's always difficult to say because it's completely a guess. Anybody that says they know, they don't know. But I think we're heading into a dangerous period, meaning election time
Yeah,
for the United States, because that's going to trigger quite a few changes, if you will. So I think that it's a prime time, particularly with where we're sitting right now with valuations,
yeah,
and kind of if you take the environment in the whole and what they want to drive this toward, I think that's what
yeah.
I'm watching.
Absolutely. One of the things I'm looking at the moment, and I went back to the 1930s of the Great Depression to study that, to get an idea on how they did that, why it happened, and what the fallout was from that. But right now, I'm going back to 2013 when rules came into place, and I stumbled across one day. I couldn't even remember what I was researching. I stumbled across the legislation and the laws that brought the bail-in into countries around the world. And the bail-in is a major concern of mine, because if people aren't aware what this is, in 2008, when we had the great financial crash, the taxpayer bailed everyone out. So effectively, me and you, over a long period of time, would pay that off. And the government basically took, again, huge amounts of money from the central banks and loaned it to these too big to fail companies. The trouble is now, since 2013, since the Bail-in Act has been put into place, that now allows certain banks, in the event of a collapse, to go into anybody's bank account and take the cash or the money, the credit, whatever is in the bank account at the time, and use that to stop the banks failing. But what I'm seeing right now is bank consolidations. Now, these bank consolidations are either going to be through the absorption of a bank. We just had Royal Bank of Canada absorb HSBC within the area there. And it's a telltale sign to me that the banks who are authorized to enact the bail-ins are going to be the likes of the JP Morgans, the RBCs in Canada, in the UK. It could be, NatWest Bank. It could be any of the banks in the UK, and the same in Europe. It could be a German bank within Germany, something maybe like Deutsche Bank, although I see Deutsche Bank possibly as being one of the big ones that could fail, along with the likes of the Bank of America. But these bank consolidations, or the failings of banks going under, are certainly something we are going to see this year. And to me, it's a telltale sign that they need to consolidate these banks under the house of the big banks who are actually authorized to enact these bail-ins, in a precursor to going in and taking people's money. Are you seeing the same thing as I am?
Well, I think they already proved this, and this was major turning point globally. is when SVB went down, Silicon Valley Bank, and they had
Yeah.
the assets of a major sovereign nation. And now we're talking a couple levels up here because this is not just you and I with our deposits in there. They made the decision to basically usurp these funds. And when they did that, that put the world on notice. And I think that's going to be a large key turning point, not just between Russia, but between this whole BRICS thing. And so they can bail in. And there is actually, it goes even further beyond that. If you look up the Patriot Act that happened from the towers,
Yeah.
when the Twin Towers came down, there was a lot of legislation that came out, and they always name it these wonderful names, the Patriot Act. How can you not get behind that,
Oh, yeah.
But when you read into it, the freedom has just been bled out of the country like at an amazing pace, and people have no idea.
Yeah.
So agreed with
Yep.
that. They're going to keep your money, get your money out of the bank, and convert it to something that's going to hold value.
Yeah. Back to 2008, I mean, it was unknown to many, but this was a pivotal moment where the debt was passed from the private sector into the public sector. Now, this has created a bubble now where the bubble that burst in 2008, I see it as just being patched up again. It was never allowed to fully deflate. It never allowed the markets to find their own settings and levels where we had a free market again. This bubble was just patched up, and they were off to the races again. It was party time again, and all these financial vehicles that brought the house down in 2008 have been repackaged and re-put back into the financial system.
Correct.
This
That's
is
key.
now something, this bubble that is set to burst now is beyond anything we have ever seen in world history. And for me, I think it's going to
Correct.
make the Great Depression look like people just lost a few coins down the back of the sofa. Are you expecting the same? Because I think it's going to be absolute carnage. It's going to kill millions of people around the world
By design.
by design.
So what happened in 2008 when that all kind of began unraveling, they had a lot of meetings, secret meetings behind closed doors. And so what they did was all of these banks, they basically did their pick and choosing at that time, I believe. And they set up since then a great number of smaller mid-sized banks, and they're shipping off all of the garbage trash loans to them.
Yeah.
So they can be reacquired for pennies on the dollar. They're meant to fail. I think
Yeah.
we're going to have less than half of the banks that we do coming into next year,
Yeah.
either between insolvency or merger and acquisition. They'll
Yeah.
be bought up by the larger banks, but they were set up for this purpose.
Yeah. That's
They
it.
were they are earmarked to fail, and anyone that does not get on the FedNow rails or with the central bank digital currency, their payment system that they want, they will
Yeah.
fail.
Yeah.
And that's just the way that it is. And if you want, your payment, people say, oh, well, that's easy. Nobody's going to accept the central bank digital currency. Well, the entire welfare system, anybody that's on Social Security,
Yeah.
anybody getting pensions, anybody on the VA, they will be forced to do this, and to fight it they're going to make it very difficult. And once they've got enough people on, the rest will just come. That's
Yeah.
the thought.
That's it, definitely. And what people don't realize is there's a lot of people on Social Security in all countries around the world. Pensions as well, especially when it comes to government funded pensions, not only your private pensions.
Mhm.
Government pensions, there won't be any money for those. The private pensions, most pensions that are out there, the growth of many people's pensions come from the investment into the stock market. And we've spoke to people and had previous interviews where we've discussed the problems with this. And it's all down to property rights and what you actually own. And it appears from what we're making out here is that the share certificates that most people think they own, they don't own because they never receive them. Within the
Correct.
US, where you are, these certificates are held by the DTCC through a subsidiary company called Seed and Co. And the problem is with that, when the financial system crashes down and people see their stocks and shares crash down, which is the vehicle for investment for their pensions, people need to realize not only are the banks going to take your money through a bail-in, but any investments and pensions you have are going to disappear. And when you go to make a claim for the money that you have invested into the stocks and shares, you're going to find out that Seed and Co are the company that own your share certificate, and they own the property rights, which means you have no rights to the shares you thought you owned all this time. And it's going to absolutely destroy, not only the middle class, but there's going to be the upper class that are going to struggle as well. And when we look back at the Great Depression, 1929, 1930, when this went on, a lot of people may look at history in that regards and say, oh, look at all these poor people that are queuing up, for soup and bread and whatever in these huge lines because they're starving and they don't have work. What people don't realize is they crashed the banking system deliberately at that point, and they opened up only a few banks that were affiliated again to the central bank system. And all those banks that people had the money in that were closed and never reopened, everybody lost every penny that was in those banks. And it wasn't just the poor people, it was the rich people as well. And those people that we see
Correct.
queuing up in those bread lines for soup and food just to stay alive are rich people as well as poor people. And the goal of those who are doing this right now is to create the greatest wealth transfer in known history and make everybody poor except themselves. And that will be a very, very small few people, again, that want to control the populace of the world. And this is what people really need to wrap their heads around. And if they don't think it could happen, if they don't think that their trusted governments would ever go down this road and allow this to happen, you need to think again, because this is nothing more than history repeating itself.
Yeah, they say it rhymes, and we didn't learn the first time.
No.
I spent a lot of time around elder people when I was growing up, and I think a lot of the stories and things that I got were very beneficial and very blessed with that, because I think that different kind of perspective is really what saved me.
Yeah. And one thing that people need to look at now, again, when we looked at the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the climate change policies and the agendas that are in place, people need to
Davos.
realize what the true purpose of these 15-minute cities are as well. I mean, you've seen them popping up, you've seen the agenda. I mean, do you see the 15-minute cities becoming nothing more than a prison?
Basically, yes, they're full surveillance, meaning not just where you move, but how you transact, what you're purchasing. I mean, they just haven't locked it down yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Back to the central banks. The only way they can think and the only way that they can contain the debt hyperbubble is to continue pumping money into the system. How much can they continue to do this before the money has no value anymore? And is this a deliberate tactic of theirs, or is their final goal to own everything? And supposedly we would be happy in conjunction with the likes of the World Economic Forum.
So to answer, I think yes and yes. Yes, it's deliberate. And the biggest one, I think, I have no idea how long they can keep this on, because to be honest with you, I thought this would have crumbled prior, but in 2008, they pumped everything up and put it on life support.
Yeah.
And here we are quite a few years later. So I think there's quite a few of us that looked at that saying, structurally, this shouldn't have happened. And
No.
so some of us are getting a little, a bit of apathy, if you will, thinking there's no end to what they can do with this. So I don't know how long they can keep this going. The one other thing I would like to add to that is that these are all in relative to each other. So we're in currency wars. They're in a race to the bottom. So
Yeah.
we're kind of aligned, if you will, with Western currencies, meaning the euro. And, so we've got our side. We're trying to crush the other side first. Once that's done, then one of the last ones, I think, probably to fall prior to the dollar would be the euro.
Yes.
And then and the dollar will go down eventually, but it's going to be in that order because
Yeah.
it's a currency war.
Yeah, I'm seeing exactly the same. And I think Germany is going to be the key part of Europe that's going to go down. It's the financial hub that's keeping together the European Union. And certainly the bankrupt countries of the likes of Greece and Spain and other countries within Europe that are basically financially insolvent at the moment. But because everything's under the umbrella of the European Union, the industrial hub of Germany itself has kept that alive for so long. But I'm seeing Germany failing as well at the moment. And once Germany
Right.
goes, there's nothing there to glue these countries together any longer. And again, this could be the trigger point of what then tips into the US, Canada, the UK,
Could be,
and really
could
bring
very
that.
well be.
Yeah, that's it.
So Germany has been the powerhouse for, for some time it's been known, but a lot of what they produced and they were kind of the shining star was on the back of cheap energy.
Yes.
And so this critical difference that we're seeing now is with the whole sanctions. And when their energy went up, it crushed them literally because they cannot produce at the same cost, basically.
Yeah.
And if you look at, when you drill this down to the very basics of it, the currency of nature is energy.
Yeah.
It's the calorie. That's how they trade in animals. It's the drive, and
Yeah.
we've just kind of converted it in a different way. But yeah, when that energy change hit, Germany's that could be it.
That's it. And we've seen within other countries as well, many small businesses, mom and pop shops and companies, even some of the larger companies going under just because of the cost of energy and lighting and heating within their stores that they have. And this has taken a lot down. And, this again causes a knock-on effect. The people are unemployed, the cost of living's higher. It's it's
Mhm.
causing a point now where people can no longer service the debt they have, and there is so much defaulted debt happening that it's causing massive problems within the debt market. But a lot of these debts, whether it's for a mortgage on a property, a loan, vehicle financing, whatever it is that people are defaulting on, and I know credit cards is a major thing. This is a debt market which is into the trillions, and the defaulting on credit cards itself is absolutely massive at the moment. But is this debt landing back in the hands of the banks? And is this what's going to cause the bigger problems for the banks? And do we think that this is what's going to really start to bring the house of banking down? Alluding to what we said a little bit earlier about the consolidation and the closing down of many banks, filtering it to more of a monopoly of the bigger banks.
Well, that's how they'll do it. So they'll shift off all of this debt to the ones that they don't want or that were set up to fail.
Yeah,
And the mega banks, JP Morgan Chase, they're not going to go down.
yeah. No, the two again, they are too big to fail, but they're also earmarked to be the vehicle of oppression against the people, and that's I'm not a big fan of banks. I think they're a necessary evil. But one of the things I'd like to talk about with banks and something which can put the banks out of business very quickly. Recently, they removed the loans that were in place for runs on the banks, which actually happened after the Silicon Valley Bank. And the central banks came to the rescue, started loaning money to the banks. That's now been revoked, which is going to put a lot of pressure on banks who aren't receiving that kind of money coming in, especially if
Mhm.
people are watching this and they wise up to the fact that their money isn't going to be in their accounts if they allow this to continue. And probably the best safety mechanism is for people to take the money out their accounts and put it into assets that are going to sustain them over the periods of this financial crash. But one of the major things that people aren't aware of is the actual insolvency of the majority of the banks, and the fact that the central banks are doing something called overnight lending. Can you explain to us how the overnight lending system works and how it keeps the bank solvent just for enough period of time that they can get through another day of transactions?
Well, yeah, it's the shell game with banks, with the central bank just kind of shifting it over. They changed the balance sheets back and forth. And along with what you were talking about, the short term bank lending program. And I guess the key in all of this here, because these banks are going to be going down, it is baking liquidity overnight. But what you can see from, if history proves itself, is that there will be more capital controls. So if you go into a bank right now in the United States and you attempt to pull out anything more than, for most of them, the limit is $3,000.
Yeah.
You have to fill out a form and they have to do paperwork on it. So if
Your
you
own
have
money.
more than that on your own money, they will tell you no, or they will tell you you have to have a wait period of whatever it is, whether it's 10 days or it depends on the bank.
Yeah.
But you can't even, so start now. I'm trying to tell people, get your money out. And there's even a difference between saying that they've got your money, the digital numbers, and having the physical dollars
Yeah.
of those bills in your hand. Because I think it's only 11% are actually in existence.
Yeah.
So these banks are going down, and I have no idea when.
No.
Nobody knows when exactly, except maybe them, but they're designed to go down. We don't need banks. It's just they've
Yeah.
driven us to think that we do.
Oh
They've
yeah.
become convenient, but there's ways around this. We need to start using those ways now. So it's natural. When all of this comes down, we've already got that side system set up.
Yeah. And that's
So
it. We're getting to a point in time now where people will have to make the biggest decision of their lives. At the point of collapse, society will try and destroy itself in a bid to survive. And amidst that panic and fear, the very same central banks are likely to offer a digital currency solution, which is going to be backed by government's universal basic incomes. And to a lot of people, this might sound crazy, but this, in my eyes, is the crossroads of us or them. And if
mhm.
people can hang in there and not fall into the central banking trap, then I do believe that we can take back control of our world. And I do believe that what we just discussed a moment ago of people now getting the money out of these banks and making sure they put it into assets, whether that be silver, which is a favorite of mine, or gold, or whether they put it into food or property or land, collectible vehicles, artwork, whatever it is, put it into something that further down the line is going to have interest for people. It's going to be a tradable commodity, or it's going to be
Exactly.
something that becomes money itself. What are your thoughts on this?
No, exactly. So you need tradable goods. And I like silver, bullion, silver, smaller denominations are fine. I think they're going to try to flood some fakes out there to try to counter people going into that.
Yeah.
However, the key to all of this is you can't do it alone. Really, it's community. Start first with getting to know people who would start trading with you. Sometimes I used to tip people with silver, just to kind of get that conversation going. And once more people are thinking about it, because I think that it is really going to make the difference. If you've got food, and nobody can do this alone.
Yeah,
So
that's it. I mean, 2024 is going to be the biggest year ever of elections globally. We've got the most new leadership coming into play from the voting system all around the world. Do you think they will wait until the people are in? So basically, the leaders that are going to be voted in, do you think they're going to wait until they are put into positions of power before they allow the crash to happen? So the very elected, supposedly democratically elected leaders,
selected, yeah.
selected, yeah, selected. The selected leaders are in place then to oversee everything that they're trying to bring into place with digital currency, with the taxation, the climate policies, and certainly the leveraging of control over people. Do you think they'll make sure that these elections happen first before they pull the trigger on this? Or is the financial system unstable enough as it is for it to go down in a natural manner and for them to not have any control over that? Or is this a controlled demolition from the top down?
I think it's a controlled demolition from the top down. So I don't know as much politically in a lot of areas, but I think that they've already got their people installed
Yeah,
in most of the places. And I think that part of the unrest that we're seeing in Haiti right now, that is because their installed person was rejected.
yeah,
And we're also seeing this in some nations in Africa. And it's very encouraging to me to see them waking up and seeing that they're, between all of the mining and stuff, but basically all of these selections, if you will, they're already in place. They're all backed by the military, and that's what it boils down to. The dollar is good for nothing except they say it is,
Yeah.
and they'll
I
beat
mean,
you up if you don't take it.
how are you seeing the markets being manipulated? What are the tools they are using? Other than, we know that the central banks are printing money out of thin air, but are they buying everything up? Are they buying the shares of companies to keep them high? Is this why we're seeing such buoyant markets at the moment? What are the manipulation techniques that they are actually using to create this whole illusion that we're seeing in front of us?
That the whole thing is manipulated. The numbers that they come out with, and they'll always, like the Federal Reserve, they come out with presidents to kind of use their language to guide the market whichever direction they want it to hit. But
Yeah,
as far as the manipulation, directly, there's directly or indirectly. The indirectly kind of is with that, the fake numbers, and they're going to tell you which direction you need to go and where you're going to put your money in, but indirectly through companies like BlackRock.
yeah,
So not allowed to purchase stocks, but they can change loan levels and limits. They are affecting the amounts that pensions are allowed to hold. These are the big money. And
yeah,
when they affect the big money, so to speak, the retailers are just in the back and they're going to be slaughtered.
yeah,
But that's the whole point of it. And as you said earlier, stock certificates actually used to exist. Now they're all through a central clearinghouse to, as they say, the reason was to increase liquidity of the pool of the stocks. But now they're all held by central authority, and same thing can be bailed in.
yeah,
So it doesn't really matter. So am I still in? Yes, but minimally.
yeah,
Not
absolutely.
nothing I can't afford to just. I won't like it, but I can walk away from it and be fine.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Now, is the commercial real estate market starting to look like a fire sale?
it is.
Yeah,
It is more every day. We're watching. Roughly, what I'm seeing is anywhere between 60 and 80% of what they were purchased for. We're talking 3-4 years ago,
yeah,
because typically the loan terms are, you don't do the 30 years on those.
yeah.
So
And the defaults from this again are going to have major impacts on the banks who have financed these. And again, people don't have tenants into the office buildings because all of a sudden people realize that the staff can work from home. And the past four
right.
years with the COVID, that has been a key thing to push this forward and allow this to happen. Do you see this having a knock-on effect to the private homes and to people who have houses? Are we going to see again a repeat of 2008 where people are just going to start walking away from the homes and handing the keys back?
I think so. It's very local. We're still going to have strong areas. It's going to be in pockets because real estate is local, especially with residential.
Yeah,
So the commercial real estate directly is not going to have that effect, but the overall financial conditions that it will cause definitely will bring that on. Corporations, the layoffs have not even begun. So the unemployment rate to me is one of the key factors that I'm watching because that tells the real economy, and their numbers are unreported. Right now, they're saying 3.9%. We are probably more realistically 9 to 10%. And I think we're going to have to hit probably between 20 and 23%
yeah,
unemployment before they step in, cut rates, and really, they want real pain.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the level. And I think that over in Europe, it's going to have to be higher as it was last time, closer to 30%, probably 27, 28% unemployment. So if you think about that, you got 4 friends, one of them out permanently. The other
Yeah.
one probably lost their job, but can get another one, maybe a part-time or something like that. It's a massive amount of people that are going to be hitting soup kitchens, so to
Yeah,
speak. You know,
absolutely. One of the manipulation techniques in regards to the production of some of those unemployment figures is the fact that, as we discussed a little bit earlier, people are struggling to put food on the table and live due to the cost and the increase in living around the world. So a lot of these job numbers, when the job numbers are produced, that's, one individual may now have to have two jobs or even three jobs to survive. So one
Right.
person can be seen as having three jobs, but they will just use those numbers as, well, there's three jobs being taken there. Not that it's by one individual. And
Correct.
this skews the numbers massively in
Yes,
regards to the good news data that they like to put out for the job results and the employment results. But
exactly.
unfortunately, it's people trying to make ends meet, covering
In
two
real life.
in real
Yes.
life. Yeah.
And and so there's another number that we watch. It's aggregate hours worked because you just hit the nail on the head. So what they've got is when they say we've lost a job, so you've lost $100,000 a year, tech job, and they're saying, oh, but we gained two jobs. That's two part-time jobs down on lower end. It's not the same. It's
No.
not the same, but their numbers have doubled, and so it looks wonderful. But if you look at aggregate hours worked, it's the same. Or if you look at the amount of pay that has gone out, it's less.
Yeah.
People in the spectrum, they're beginning to feel that in the real world.
Yeah. What are the major impacts again on the cost of living for people right now? And this has only happened in the past few months, is the cost of increasing insurances. I know that a lot of the banks are involved in insurance, but then there's separate insurance companies. Do you know what the reason is why we're seeing a major hike in the cost of insurance? And we're talking home insurance, vehicle insurance, and health insurance for people. What's the driving factor of why this is happening?
If you ask them, it's climate change. So
Yeah. If you ask me, I think it's that more people are dying than they expected, and it's costing them a lot of money.
probably that's a good portion of it. So I know that there have been quite a few, floods, and so that's the excuse that they're using all of the damage. They can no longer afford this. And for instance, in Florida, you can if you can get insurance, and also California, you're very fortunate, and if you do, you're paying 2-3 times what you would have been just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So it's very real, going up 25-30%. Now you're paying more for your insurance than you are for your vehicle payment.
Yeah. And
So
the knock-on effect of this as well, I've just seen the condo issue. A lot of people that have apartments, condos in Florida,
yes,
the market is now being flooded with condos. And again, this is going to have a severe effect on the value of property within Florida. But do you think that this is due to the cost of the fees for the homeowner associations, as well as the
yes.
cost of insurance on the properties, which is the contributing factor to this?
So homeowners association, they have to pay the general fees, insurance for an area as well, anything that's shared. So insurance is an additional fee that they're having to hike on. So I think there's something else that's a little kind of lurking in the background as well behind this.
Yeah,
As you're saying, now people cannot sell for half of what they were before because of these fees going up so much.
yeah,
It's eating up all of the payment money, if you will, that people have for this. But when all of these come on the market, there is another factor aside from the homeowners association fees, and that's property taxes.
right.
So as these property taxes have gone up, it's eating into that again. But going one step further, all of this revenue that the state has planned on, when all of these go vacant and they're no longer getting these property taxes,
Yeah,
that's going to be a snowball to an avalanche in its
yeah.
own right.
And it's going to get to a stage with that as well, again, where people who own these properties, which are now flooding the market for sale, people are not going to want to buy them, regardless how cheap they are, because they know that the cost of running that property is out of budget for them. And it's going to get to a stage
Precisely.
that people who have mortgages on these properties, again, are going to hand the keys back because they're no longer prepared to have such a financial chain around the neck. And this is
Right.
going to cause major problems for the banking system again, putting even more pressure on the banks and folding banks, like we were saying a little bit earlier.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Protection mode. if people haven't seen the news in China, we're seeing thousands and thousands of people queuing up to buy gold and silver. Um, this should be a telltale sign. Something, people didn't just wake up in China one morning and say, do you know what? It'd be a great day to go out and buy gold because it's cheap. Gold and
Mhm.
silver are going up in price, and people in China are aware of something coming down the pipeline that they are now going to protect themselves by buying gold and silver. Did you see these enormous queues of people queuing up to buy gold and silver in China?
Maybe it's because they don't have a Costco.
That's
Because they've
true.
started selling gold and silver in Costco now at the stores across the US. But I think you're correct. And then we've also seen a jump in Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
So they're buying Bitcoin hand over fist, gold, silver, anything they can, because they see basically what's coming down the pipe at them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's it. And it's, I understand why they're doing it, because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, they see this as a time tradition of stored wealth. And if they, I'm not sure what's going to happen to the yuan. Again, these financial wars between the countries are bigger than wars that could be fought on the ground. And right now, it seems that the superpowers around the world have been jockeying for positions. But we've also got the likes of China and Russia and India. Very funny, actually, that these are the BRICS nations. We may as well say a lot of the BRICS nations countries are buying gold and silver
Yes.
in hundreds of thousands of tons, and have been for at least the past year or so that I'm aware of. What is it that the countries are going to use this for? Is it for a store of wealth, or do you think that they're going to offer a solution up where we eventually end up with a financial system that will be backed by precious metals again?
I I would love to think that we would have a society backed by precious metals because it's much more peaceful. All of the wars, the bloodbath that is going on is distraction. It's completely unnecessary. They could figure all of this out, you know, in a good day or two within a room. They won't do it because it's not the way they're working right now. So central banks have been stacking for some time. China has not only been stacking gold and silver, but they've also been appropriating all of the mines that produce.
Right.
So now they've got their source, and that's what a big part of the battle over South America is, because they are rich in these resources, not just oil, energy, but also the precious metals and the rare earth metals as well.
Yeah.
So when you see all of these conflicts going on, the whole thing that happened with Guyana on the offshore with the oil there, now we've got ExxonMobil going in there. So, they cover this up as, oh, they're having some turmoil, some
Yeah.
stuff's going on, but really it's the natural resources that they're after. And so these central banks are stacking their gold because they want to back their own currency. It makes them strong. And back in the day, when it was kind of cool and trusted that you could store your wealth abroad in case you had war at home.
Yeah.
And the United States had this beautiful facility, Fort Knox, and it was safe to keep your gold there. But this is a
Yeah.
lesson to people as well. If you don't have it in your own possession, you don't own it.
No, no.
And that's what we're seeing.
And Germany and France found out the problems with storing gold in Fort Knox when they asked for it back and received tungsten bars covered in gold rather than the actual gold bars. And that tells me that there's not as much gold within those facilities as people actually think.
And they won't allow an audit.
No, no,
Imagine that.
there's several
So
people calling that for quite some time. And
yeah,
I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately.
I don't either.
Yeah. Back to taxation. The more money that's created by the central banks and loaned to governments falls upon the backs of the citizens of the country to repay this back in taxation. And the increases in the rates of interest is part and parcel to the amount of money that's being loaned to governments, even though in my eyes, it's absolutely ridiculous that they would start giving billions of dollars to wars the likes of Ukraine and Israel and different people, why governments think that they should give our money, or the money that we are going to be paying back as tax, to these foreign countries for fighting wars is absolutely beyond me. And I'm surprised that the people have never stood up and stopped this. But do you think that the vast majority of people are oblivious to where the debt created by the government comes from and is repaid to the central banks by the taxes of the citizens? Is this just, they think that the government prints the money and that's it? Do we need a major shakeup in the education of people here?
Well, I think so, one way or the other, but I used to think it was them, and now sometimes I wonder that it's not myself that needs this shakeup in education, because they are just printing the money.
Yeah.
And since it became, they pulled that peg to gold. And when they did that, no, they truly can't. Their modern monetary theory on money, basically, that they can just print this, and they're proving that they can do it. But we're past that point where it's sustainable, and they all agree on it now. They've all admitted this. Jerome Powell himself admitted this, to where we've got so much debt now, we cannot possibly pay it back with
No.
our GDP, even counting bombs as GDP. We're still behind. So it can't continue. But then I look at the crowds, and I speak to a lot of people that understand this, like, why would they continue this printing, getting us deeper into debt? But then you also see the crowds that are saying, oh, we need my student debt cancelled, and I need this cancelled, and I just, don't want to pay for that. It's like, who do you think is paying for that?
Yeah.
The government does not make money.
Yeah. And what's the worst case scenario with this? What could happen if a government actually defaults on this exponential debt that keeps landing on the lap? Is it something to a point where the central banks themselves are able to repossess things from the country that this government has control of? Will it be a case of asset stripping?
I don't know. That's a difficult question. I don't think they're going to get to a point of default, because they won't allow that.
Yeah.
Whatever they're going to come out with, they'll come out with something, whether it's the CBDC, and they do a reevaluation, which
Yes.
has been done in recent years. So that's kind of what I expect to happen.
Yeah.
They bring this out and they do there's a couple of scenarios, but I think that's the most likely, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So everybody will overnight lose whatever amount of value that they have, and whatever they had in the banks and whatever currency it was will be revalued to the new, whatever new standard it is. It won't be gold, it won't be silver, unless that's what you've stacked for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of corrupt politicians, a lot of corrupt corporations that are behind this happening. But with 50% of the US citizens being gun owners, will it be a problem for them to enforce such tyrannical agendas moving forward?
I think that's what they're trying to figure out now.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's such a push. We need to maintain our freedoms. People, misconstrue these all the time, but when they put this constitution in place for this country, they had just come out of a very similar environment: the war, the corruption, the basically the environment where they were being overtaxed, and it was a nation of upstarts. Now, you normally think about things a little more globally, but just going to the United States, as far as their freedoms, and they're allowing this to go away. Used to be the most free nation, and now it's not. And I think there's still a recovery that can happen. However, it's, the time is now. That's why I say people have to make a choice. It's coming to a point in time. You don't have the luxury of waiting around any longer.
People really need to protect what they've got now and prepare, because it's not a case that if it happens, it's an almost certainty that it will at some point. Can't put an absolute timeline on it, but I've got a gut feeling that it's within the next 12 months. Don't hold me to that. but the way things are ramping up, to me, it's unsustainable at a level that, we are going to see some major things. One of the major things is, many businesses have financed the growth of their operations at very low interest rates of yesteryear, but now the interest rates have climbed, and business has not been great over the past few years with what's happening. And now they need to bankroll that business again. The loans are coming due again, the mortgages are coming due again. Is it likely that the banks will not refinance to an unstable business? And if they did, that business is unlikely to be able to repay the loans at the higher interest rates?
That's a good question, because we're in a changing environment where before they would do that, but it's all because they wanted to get to this point. So now that we're kind of at this point, I think that's a very good question. I
Yeah.
don't know that that would work.
Scary. Keep you awake at night, at least.
Yeah, right. I mean, they want more debt. They always want more debt because that gives them more power.
Well, that's the only instrument and tool that they have, is to create debt. And every
Correct.
time, what people don't realize, if a dollar is created, it needs to be paid back by interest, which means another dollar has to be created to make that interest payment, unfortunately. So it's non-stop. It will never stop, but it has to get to a point where it can no longer be sustained. And that's, again, as we said, that's when the house of cards comes falling down. I mean, can governments run deficits in excess of the growth of GDP without the eventual consequences?
It has historically not worked.
Yeah.
So
So it's definitely like that. Now, Bitcoin
it's
is
not the first
obviously
time.
Bitcoin's been no, and it won't be the last. Bitcoin is something that a lot of people have done very well with, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of different digital currencies that I know people and friends are investing in. What's your view on them in regards to the digital currencies? I'm not a very techie person. It's not my favorite thing. It's not something that I invest in. I see the benefits of it. I really
Mhm.
do. And I see that people have made a lot of money on it. But what is your view on them yourself personally?
My personal opinion, I like Bitcoin, and it's because really it's a ledger. And that's really what we need as far as the money. It's independent of a third party. So kind of similar to gold and silver with that respect. However, and the reason I like Bitcoin is because it has been adopted. Not only has it been adopted, but it's got a lot of other things going for it, so to speak.
Yeah,
Now, they've already stepped in and tried to corrupt that and the ETFs and all of these derivatives they've made off of it so that they can manipulate it. Because at the very base, it's going to be very difficult for them.
yeah,
And the US government lied about it. They confiscated a good portion of it, saying that they didn't own it. So, but at any rate, I do like Bitcoin,
yeah,
Ethereum. I think a lot of projects are built on that. That's kind of like a Play-Doh, if you will,
yeah,
that they use that to build other things. I don't really care for the team that made that or the back end of it, but um, a lot of I see a lot of use cases. And so I treat all of the other ones kind of like businesses. When we used to value business, you'd look at, the purpose of it, the team that was behind it. You look at what it can do, and then basically the market for it.
yeah,
And so I like a couple of the others for that reason, the utility, but they're not in the same category, and they cannot serve as really, some of them could serve as currencies. And I've got Monero because they're talking about that's a privacy coin. And
yeah,
Bitcoin is not private. People mistakenly think that it's about privacy, and that's not it at all. It's almost the opposite.
yeah,
It's about that you're getting a clean transaction, nobody else can mess with it, because once it's in agreement, that's what it is, that you make this trade.
yeah,
So, and that it's resilient. So it is power hungry, but it's a resilient form that I like. And I think going forward into the future, if there's going to be one that could battle CBDC, if you
yeah,
could go peer to peer, if enough people could understand how to transact outside, you could barter Bitcoin. You will
yeah,
not be able to barter CBDC. Will come with full surveillance.
yeah.
So that's in short.
Should there be any concern that BlackRock made major investments into the exchange traded funds of Bitcoin?
Well, they put out the ETF, and then they purchased a good deal of it behind it. However, they're kind of raising the price, which anybody that holds it knew it would anyway.
Yeah,
So they use their massive clout to purchase a large amount of the asset, but we've also got MicroStrategy, and we've also got quite a few people in retail that own it. So yes, and the government owns quite a bit. There's a few governments that do now, even though uh, there is only one government I know that supports it, that's El Salvador. Other than that, the rest of them all talk it down, but they all own it.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is?
Yeah. I mean, talking about El Salvador, I mean, this is a country with big changes that are bringing in investors and Bitcoin billionaires.
Huge.
Is this a country that's not controlled by the central banks?
I love that country. I go there because I love what he's done with it. The crime rate is down incredibly.
Yeah.
And he exposed the IMF for what it was as well. Because back when they were hurting, and he's also exposed quite a few other things of how they got to that state in the first place. And he's beginning to tell some of the surrounding countries, look, if you want to get out of this, this is what happened and this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
So he did, he said, no, I'm going my own way. Thank you very kindly, but I don't need your loan from the IMF. And boy, did that make them angry,
Yeah.
because they wanted their strings and their fingers into what was going on there. And so he just implemented, the president there just got reelected. So he just implemented no taxes for anyone that wants to, businesses that want to come and invest in that country. And that's how you get it built. And
Yes.
when I was down there, I was watching tremendous changes. And they're going to lead, like in a tech area. They're also utilizing, they've got a volcano for the thermal energy in
Yeah.
order to mine Bitcoin. So he's built some hydroelectric dams. The people in general, a lot of them don't understand exactly what's going on, but the ones that do are very happy. They can
Yeah.
walk around at night, and I mean, it's a tremendous difference. I think they're a great example.
Does it have enough resources to become self-sustainable?
They do. They do. And they're building their trade with the local countries, and he's getting out and building relationships with several, groups. So
Do you think
he
they will
spoke at
remain?
CPAC.
Yeah. Do you think they'll remain independent? Or, I mean, there's been a lot of countries around the world that have sought to join the BRICS nation, including the likes of Mexico, Saudi Arabia. These are major players in regards to economies and financing and products that they put out into the market. Do you think El Salvador will be a country that may seek refuge from the BRICS, or will they try and remain independent?
I have no idea. It all depends on the trade and how things go in the future, but
Yeah.
he's got some pretty good resolve. I hope he keeps good security around him at all times.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen that before in other countries as well. All of a sudden a leader will take sick, or again, Soros will come in and finance a color revolution and overthrow it. And this is exactly what we saw with Ukraine as well, with Viktor Yanukovych being run out the country for foreign interests then to come in and form their own government. And sadly, they could have picked somebody better than an actor that starts playing the piano with his penis. But there we have it. The world is easily amused, and people will follow that this guy is a great leader for the country. I don't think people are really grasping exactly what's happened in the Ukraine and why it's happened. And at the end of the day, do you see this Ukraine war just continuing? Or, are we going to see problems with NATO? We discussed a little bit earlier again about World War III being one of the tools in the toolbox. Are we going to see
Yeah.
expansion of war for the reason of suppression of people around the world? Seems very much like, again, like the 1930s leading into World War II.
Yeah, I can't read the future, but it looks like that's the direction that they're trying to take this whole thing to head it. So Ukraine was an incredible amount of corruption, and people have no idea that level. So I think it's going to continue at least until they need that cover up
Yeah.
to stay. And if you look at, they're going to, they're building this bridge. It's not going to be functional for 60 days. But
Yeah.
they're talking about how they need to get this aid there, and they're going to be talking peace. Well, why would you start on a bridge that's not going to be done for 60 days?
Yeah.
Does that even make sense?
No,
No
absolutely.
one even questions.
No. And what doesn't make sense as well is the fact that we've got a lot of countries joining up with NATO and showing their allegiance with NATO. Do the citizens of these countries not realize the risk that they're putting themselves in in regards to being a possible target from attack from Russia should this thing go nuclear?
I I think they do. Again, I'm not much on the larger politics, but I suspect that they're being given an alternative, and you
Yeah,
know,
no,
that's
I
typical
understand. Yeah,
of the
again.
United States. Yeah. In fact, I have a video of one that I can send you. I put
Yeah,
out not long ago about the, yeah, kind
yeah.
of how we work.
Absolutely. And what we'll do, we'll wrap this up now. This has been solid, riveting, informative conversation. I think people are going to get a lot out of it. I think if people share this and get it out there and send it to the friends, it's at least going to be a warning to people, and people are going to understand the pressure and the problems that we are facing currently, and people will be able to make some, preparations in regards to at least saving themselves, or surviving a little bit longer than they can once this
I
all
hope
comes
so.
down. What I'll
Yeah.
do, I'm going to put a link to your YouTube channel into the show notes. We're going to get this out there. I hope it
Thank you.
impacts a lot of people. I hope people get a lot out of this. But please share this. And again, thank you very much again for you coming on, Lava. This has been incredible conversation, and I hope it does the rounds. I hope people understand what's going on, and I hope that we can really make a dent in the war, the true war that we are against, and that is the true war against the system which seeks to oppress us. So thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we go?
No, just I hope so as well, my friend, because it really is important at this time. We can only take so many people with us, so as many as we can get prepared to at least have an idea on this.
Yeah.
And I just thank you very kindly. The pleasure has been all mine. It's
No,
just
no.
thank
Thank
you
you so
kindly.
much. Thank you so much. And again, in the future, we'll talk soon. And as we always say here on the show, believe nothing and question everything. And we'll catch you soon in another incredible episode of the Atlantic Underground podcast. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. Stay free.
Thank you.